Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1998 Represent. On this episode, we're taking a look at This Is Hardcore by Pulp, another music album. I was only really familiar with Pulp from, I think, the song Common People. I think is what it was called, and it was off of their previous album. And this album showed up on a lot of like best of 1998's or best albums of 1998 lists. So I decided to listen to it. I listened to it a few times over the last week or so. I ended up really enjoying it, and we're going to do an episode about that. So I have some notes here we're going to go over. Then I'm going to discuss what I thought of the album and so on. So let me bring up my notes for this. Alright, so we have This Is Hardcore by Pulp, first released March 30th, 1998. This is their sixth studio album, and it was the follow-up album to Different Class. Common People is off of that album, and I know William Shatner kind of famously did a cover of that song. Common People might be their best-known song. I'm not sure if it's my favorite song from them, but it's probably one of their most well-known songs. This album didn't do as well, I don't think commercially, as that previous album, but This Is Hardcore is still pretty good overall. So again, follow up to Different Class. A lot of kind of people kind of cite this album as kind of being kind of like the end of Britpop or the Britpop kind of genre. Some famous bands that were doing Britpop music at the time were like Oasis, Blur, Pulp was part of that as well, like Elastica, and just a whole bunch of other kind of British bands from the kind of mid-90s. I think a lot of people were also like calling it like the second British invasion, kind of very similar to the one from the 60s, where it was a lot of bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, bands like that were getting very popular in the United States as well as where they're from in England. So kind of like a second British invasion, if you will. But a lot of kind of people kind of cite this album as being kind of the end of Britpop. Let's see here. Yeah, so there was an article when this album was kind of released. The article was titled, quote, "How Pulp's This Is Hardcore Brought Britpop to a Halt." And then Pitchfork had the list I was going off of for this particular video, or one of the lists I go off of for this series, is one of Pitchfork's list, and it's a 50 best albums of 1998 list. And this album is on there. And they had a pretty good quote about the album and kind of Britpop. Let me have open this other window I have open here with the note on it. So the quote from Pitchfork, or the little blurb about this album in that article, and I'll leave a link in the description to check the article out, was several events can be pinpointed as the moment Britpop died. The release of Blur's discordant 1997 self-titled album, the debut of the Spice Girls, that feeling that sunk in when you hit minute 3 of Oasis's All Around the World and realized, F me, there's still 6 minutes of this to go. But there's no disputing that This Is Hardcore was a tombstone dropped onto the grave, the heavy dark gray monolith that brought resounding finality to it all. Pulp were the outsiders who saw themselves as bystanders to the Britpop party, but still managed to get sucked up in the cocaine supernova. This Is Hardcore was Jarvis Cocker's distress single sent from behind the velvet rope at 4 a.m. when the club lights flip on and expose all the cigarette smoke and deprecation hanging in the room. It's the dramatic string-swept soundtrack of drug-induced panic attacks, The Fear, song off the album, Sexual Depravity, the title track of the album, and the stone-cold sober realization that you're not getting any younger. That's Helped the Age, another track off this album as well. It says, here Pulp fantasizes about their own funeral, barely making it out alive. And that's from Stuart Berman. And that's kind of from the little blurb that Pitchfork wrote about this album on their best albums of 1998 list. Again, I will leave a link in the description to check that article out. Rolling Stone also had a very interesting quote about this album as well. And Rolling Stone says this is, quote, less bright and bouncy than its era-defining predecessor, but praised it as being even more daring and fully realized. It's a quote, it plays like a movie, a series of scenes from a life, and then it, quote, is arguably the first pop album devoted entirely to the subject of the long, slow fade. There was another article I read about this album that said it was kind of made depression like sound cool, because a lot of the songs are very kind of toned down. Just like there's a song about doing dishes. He's like, I've got to get these dishes clean, and it's kind of like very low key. It's a very good album overall. It's not really like I don't know exactly if it'd be rock, but I guess it is a rock album, but it's very kind of like a low key rock album. So we went through that. I guess this was also part of the time period when the whole Cool Britannica thing was going on, which was it ended up coming over here as well, but in the mid '90s in England or in the UK, it was a kind of an uptick or just kind of upswing in like national British pride, especially in like various culture. So like a lot of like people like it's kind of very like telling in. I know one article I read about not Britpop, but the Cool Britannica thing was Noel Gallagher's Union Jack guitar. Another one was Jerry Halliwell Ginger Spice's Union Jack dress. So there was this whole kind of upswing in just British pride at the time in like the mid to late '90s. And I know that kind of spread over here a little bit because I had a couple friends in high school that like were very into kind of things that were very British, like so definitely kind of like picking up on British culture and kind of not I don't want to say emulating it, but definitely having like an appreciation for it. One of my friends ended up taking a trip to London. I want to say like this was maybe like 1995, maybe 1996. And I had another friend that was wearing kind of like a lot of like soccer jerseys, kind of before. I think there was like at least in my kind of friend group, a lot of interest in kind of British like football / soccer teams. So like a lot of the kind of like Premier League teams and things like that. So definitely a kind of upsurge in like British pride during the mid to late '90s. So that kind of like Britpop was part of that, and the whole like I think the wider movement, Britpop being the genre or a genre, and the Cool Britannica thing being kind of like the wider cultural impact of that of that as well. It's definitely a very interesting time because I definitely remember there being a lot of like I said, my friends were getting into more British stuff. I don't necessarily know if James Bond would fall into that, even though James Bond did kind of take on a more. There was more interest in James Bond, like 1995 forward, because like I think like was it License to Kill? I think was the last one with Timothy Dalton. They kind of didn't do a James Bond movie for several years before GoldenEye, and then the video game came out, and then Tomorrow Never Dies came out, and World Was Not Enough. But another British thing that I think James Bond kind of like definitely predates that, but I think James Bond kind of probably also was factored into it. You could say like the Austin Powers stuff kind of was part of that as well because it was kind of like harkening back to like this to like the swinging '60s kind of London era and stuff like that. Pulp, I guess, one thing I was reading about Britpop was the big bands in Britpop were Oasis, Blur, and Suede. Or Suede. I think it's Suede, but I think they go by the London Suede to like kind of differentiate it from the older band. But Pulp kind of, I guess, were like in that article or a quote, were kind of like the outliers in Britpop. I think they kind of distance themselves from that genre a little bit, but I think like they're still considered to be like part of it, if you will. Jarvis Cocker, the like lead singer, at one point there was some tension with the band after Different Class came out, and Jarvis Cocker, according to my research, ended up moving to New York to kind of just write music like on his own away from the band. Not writing stuff that was not going to be pulp music, but basically just writing on his own because there was a bunch of tension going on after the previous album came out. So he kind of just wanted to get away from it all, get some stuff written, and then go back, and then he ended up getting it all recorded. When I was listening to this album, I definitely, it could be just because they're British, but it definitely felt like there were some songs that almost kind of had like a Pink Floyd like quality to them. Mostly in the vocals. It may just be the way let's see, Jarvis Cocker was doing his kind of like his like delivering of the lyrics, but some of it sounded like Roger Waters era Pink Floyd. There were times where it kind of like had like a David Bowie kind of vibe to it. So that's probably just because it's British, like a British musician. But it definitely had that kind of, when I was listening to it, it definitely kind of had like some of the like inflections of David Bowie or Roger Waters. And I think that's at least that's kind of the impression that I got, or the feeling I got when I was listening to it. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the track list now. Let me just pull that up here. So let me see. So the songs, let's see, it's about an hour long, a little over an hour. There is going to be 12 tracks on there. So we have track 1 is The Fear. Track 2 is Dishes. Like I said, there's a song where he's like literally talking about washing dishes. Track 3 is Party Hard. Track 4 is Help the Aged. Track 5 is This Is Hardcore. Track 6 is TV Movie. Track 7 is A Little Soul. Track 8 is I'm a Man. Track 9 is Seductive Berry. Track 10 is Sylvia. Track 11 is Glory Days. And track 12 is The Day After the Revolution. So, 12 tracks, a little over an hour in length. And I've listened to it, I want to say I listened to it like twice over the last like week or so. And ended up quite enjoying it. Like I said, I was only really familiar with probably, if I heard some more pulp music, I probably definitely like would be able to like identify some of it. But I think Common People is probably the one that I know the most, because I've heard that a few times, and I've heard like the William Shatner cover of it. But This Is Hardcore is a pretty good album. I would definitely recommend checking it out. Like I listened to it on Apple Music over the last like week or so. But definitely a very kind of interesting album. And kind of from a very kind of interesting time, especially in like British music, where, like I said, Britpop was kind of coming. I guess like a lot of people say it was kind of like going away at this point. But a lot of it was kind of like very harkening back to kind of like the original British invasion with like the Beatles and bands like that. And I think like a lot of other bands in the 90s that were kind of like in the Britpop genre were very Beatles-esque, especially like bands like Oasis. But definitely an interesting time in music. I think that's going to do it for this video. We'll be back again in a few days. We'll probably be doing another movie and follow that up with like another video game like we've been doing for the rest of this series. But again, that's going to do it for now. So remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.